this is a part 2 of discovering the cultural tipping point. So I thought this morning share what Thomas said was really interesting. What does our individual paths have to do with creating a global tipping point? Thomas has a vast background, graduated from Duke, where he spent 2 years studying ethics, world religions, symbolic communication, and Jungian psychology, and also attended divinity school. He has a master's degree in psychotherapy and social change, and is licensed marriage, family, and child therapist, specializing in transformational group psychotherapy. He has a second master's and clinical doctorate in clinical psychology. And after working with clinical psychology and psychic emergency in both in and outpatient setting, he helped launch the Association of Psychic Practitioners in Northern California. He's been an active member of Mankind Project, becoming a declared elder in 2019. He lived in North Carolina for 4 decades and then returned to the West Coast to be near his daughter and grandson in Seattle. So I am just delighted that he's back with us. So Thomas Griggs, welcome.
Thank you, Mary Grace. Appreciate it. I'm fundamentally struck by how at home I feel in this circle, and how easy it is to trust and relax, and it's nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation again. So last time, I'm going to do a very quick review of what we talked about last time, but can I just see a show of hands of how many people were present on October the 5th when we had part 1 of this discovering a tipping point? Can you see those? And hold them up for a second so I get a sense of, okay, so that's certainly the majority of folks. And so we've got 2 audiences, those that may recall that and those that may have no idea what we're talking about. So let me quickly flip through a few slides to review that. As you look at these slides, if you will, be thinking about what are the questions that are in front of you. What are the assumptions and what are the questions that we raised last time, a month ago? And then we are going to spend time in a participatory exercise with everybody asking more questions, but this will get us warmed up if you look at this preview with that in mind. And that would be maybe here. Let's see, what are you seeing? Okay, we need to unmute everybody, I think, in order to hear some answers. What screen do you see, Sarah?
Discovering the cultural tipping point for a shift in global consciousness.
Perfect, okay. The other one I'm looking at is my grandson dressed up for Halloween, so. There we go. This will. I'm going to make you all a little bigger so you can see what we're doing. Okay. In part 2, we're fundamentally focused on asking stronger questions and accessing a wisdom greater than our own in this circle. It's not quite the same thing as looking outside to some imagined other source of wisdom. We're really focusing on ourselves here today. And since everything is connected, it's kind of a silly distinction to talk about inside, outside. as I said, so this is the quick review. Note these assumptions in here. We talked about how do we invite a recognition of a wisdom greater than our own, that wisdom is accessible to us and that it will be used for the benefit of all. What is a big enough idea or a big enough question that would invite a shift in consciousness where we can engage in a transformational process of solving the world's problems? And we can't do it incrementally. We don't have the time. And again, when I think about we don't have time, I'm aware that that's a scarcity conversation and it leads to competitive behavior. And I do feel some urgency about climate change. One part of me has got that blissful Zen, it's going to be what it is. But another part of me feels urgent. And I imagine you all go back and forth between the two. We talked a little bit about how do we bring up the subject of accessing a wisdom greater than our own with other people who don't start from this premise, as probably everybody here does. How have humans sought a greater wisdom historically? What might we learn from a survey of the systems of divination? And on the October 5th, we did survey a lot of those historical forms of divination. We talked a little bit about what are the challenges to creating a shift in consciousness. My assumption is that everything is connected and that it's meaningfully connected, and therefore those systems of divination reflect ourselves to us. They're reflections, meaningful reflections. That's why they work. And remember, I'm just putting it out here I'd like you to be thinking where your questions are going now. What questions are you going to be raising in our time together this morning? So you can take any piece of what you're seeing and step off from there to ask questions, or you can start from the check-ins, the personal check-ins this morning if you want to, and ask questions from there. It's all the same. I mentioned that one possibility for an idea big enough to encourage a shift is close encounters of the fifth kind, in which humans are intentionally reaching out to connect with extraterrestrial life and extraterrestrial beings and intelligence, and what we do with that contact. These are references that I gave you to investigate if you were interested in this conversation. Also looked at a little bit of data about why would we hope for a shift? Why might we expect a shift? How realistic? That's my mind works that way. I'm very Capricornish. I'm kind of a double Capricorn. I like to know where the ground is on, if I'm going to take a step, I want to know what I'm stepping onto. Just the way I'm built in this lifetime. So to me, I see hope in these numbers. You can read, so I'm not going to read it to you. Okay, here we are then. Let's start to play. I call this question rounding. It's an inquiry technique. How many of you have ever been to what was called an inquiry, where you use different techniques to explore a subject? Mary Grace, I've been following you, or you've been following me one way or another, because you always raise your hand when I ask this question. Okay, here's how it works. When the clock starts, which it will in a couple of minutes, we are going to do nothing but pose questions. That's all you'll hear. There won't be any other dialogue. You won't be giving explanations or apologies. You won't be commenting on people's questions. It'll just be the questions themselves. So you are invited to listen, and you do this with your eyes open or closed. It doesn't really matter. Allow the questions to work without, like, for example, making noises of approval and so on, like introducing judgment into the process. Just let the questions work. Honor the previous questions with a brief pause, and then anybody can speak. Don't worry about whether you're speaking on top of somebody else. You will just naturally and gently sort that out and either assume the role of the person asking a question, or you will defer. It'll work itself out. We want to deepen the inquiry. We want to explore this subject, but you're not imprisoned in this subject. It's just a suggested starting point, like an attractor, a strange attractor around which we can organize our exploration. And listen to what kinds of questions you are asking. So we're inviting you to ask genuine, sometimes heuristic questions, not questions that have an embedded answer. That they're not cloaking devices where you're saying something and making a point, but putting it in the form of a question. That's what I mean by genuine questions. So they're not rhetorical, and they're not teaching, they're not pedantic. You get the idea? Any questions? We are going to take everybody off mute, or ask you to take yourselves off mute. And do go back on mute if you need to control background noise, so we can concentrate on what we're doing. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, can I take everybody off? I could, but Mary Grace, will you do that for me?
Actually, I can't even do that as a host. People have to unmute themselves. I can mute people, but I cannot unmute them.
Okay.
So everybody needs to unmute.
All right. So all those of you who are ready to, who can. So is that Russ?
With the screen share on, we're only able to see a very limited number of people. I don't know if.
Okay, I will come. I can stop the share. We don't need it. You have the idea here. So thank you for that. And I am going to close my window to control my background noise. Excuse me. Okay, are there any questions about this process? Even if you're the only one with a question. Not seeing any questions. I will participate as well, so everybody is equal in this exercise. And if you want to, you can take notes about what you're hearing, but that's not necessary. We are still recording. I think if somebody wanted to go back and listen to this, they could. So. And we're going to go for 15 minutes at a minimum. I may extend that a little bit, and then we'll have time to break and talk about what you're experiencing, what you're learning. Okay, the floor is open. Who has a question? Just go. I'm not going to moderate from here. Just go ahead and give your question, and we'll go from there.
My constant question for myself is, am I doing what I came here to do?
What is my role when seeing people close to me suffering so much?
If the whole planet were enlightened, what would be happening?
If there is in fact a divine plan, where do I fit in?
What happens when we suppose that the shift in global consciousness that we are inviting has occurred already many, many, many times in our universe?
Yeah.
What's the next dimension that I've been hearing where shifting our consciousness from the third dimension to the fifth dimension? And will things look different to us?
Yeah. What is a close encounter?
If there have been 5 civilizations before this one, 4 or 5, what's going to cause this one to succeed? What do we have to do to make this one work finally?
Am I meant to be just a active participant, or at this point to be an observer?
How can I use what I've learned over the last 40 years to help the planet and the people on it?
Can I ever know that the path I have chosen is the best one?
Will it be ever possible to return to simple way of life of living in pods and living from whatever the earth gives us locally without our passion for buying things on Amazon?
Is it enough to just be aware, or does the universe require that I always make a contribution?
How can I help people wake up more quickly and more deeply?
How can music help?
How will I understand when the transformation is taking place?
How long does it take for a shift in consciousness to actually happen, both on a personal and collective level? And is it a linear process or not?
What is the major turning point for me interiorly?
Is it possible to become enlightened without going through the dark night of the soul?
Is love enough?
Can we transform death and make it a non-judgmental journey? Can we transform loss into love?
What can we do to help preserve the planet? How can we help others to think about using less fossil fuels, less plastics, less metals, all of which pollute the environment? What can we do to save Mother Earth?
Are we descendants? Are we descendants of the extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings? Are they here to help us?
What role does hope play in encouraging transformation? And what are the sources of hope today?
How do we use AI technology without losing our soul?
How do we stay with the wisdom of the seed and come back from the side roads?
Wow.
How can we harmonize between people beyond right and wrong?
What would have people, enough people, believe that extraterrestrial wisdom and help is benevolent?
How do we transform the appearances and the pull of the separate self?
How do we balance our need for autonomy and freedom with surrendering to the consciousness of the group?
When will humans on Earth and other life in other universes that visit connect and communicate and truly bond?
What effect will the government's disclosure that folks have been collecting evidence of ET visitation for decades occur? When will that occur? And what effect will it have?
How is it possible that our government has brainwashed so large a portion of humanity.
Why do we care so much about our particular country?
What is true happiness?
What is the fastest way or the best way to change from duality to one as a mindset?
Heart set.
Am I doing enough? Are we doing enough here in the Western world to bring just and equality and support for the countries that have less resources?
And I handle the truth.
How do we get out of our own way and open up to the universe and to see to stop standing in our own way and to let in the good and to know that there's enough in the universe for everyone.
What is the right balance for me between personal work and social action?
What are the universal truths, and who's to say if they are the truth?
How do we tend to our top priorities, our ABs, in every day?
How do we how can we help to be sure that everyone is treated equally, no matter anything, color, religion? We're all one. We're all part of the human race.
Are we asking the best questions?
What are some of the lies I hide behind and feel protected behind?
Is it all a dance of love? And how can I become love more?
Is life fair?
Is there truly a meaning behind all this, or are we just fooling ourselves?
Is there life after death? Do our souls continue?
Are we being watched by other being, post-death or from other universes?
Is the concept of Santa Claus we were taught about when we were young real?
Right. Are we the greatest miracle in the universe?
Is there any solution for bringing us closer in our thought process for the better of all?
What's behind this concept of God? And what is our need to have relationship with God and to start war over gods and beliefs?
What would be the most dangerous questions we could ask at this point in history?
Am I controlled? And I don't know it.
Is there really right and wrong?
How do we encourage everyone for the goal of peace? Leave war behind. Let's all work in the same direction for the good of all.
How do we hold our beliefs lightly?
What kind of world do the little children of today look forward to?
What the world would look like if we will treat each other with reverence.
What is the picture of the future that you would like to see for our world?
Can we ban or destroy all weapons out of existence?
How do we break free of our patterns?
1 minute till we shift.
Unconditional love.
What about it?
Just questions, please.
What are my figments of my imagination? What are not?
How much pleasure can we really allow ourselves to have? Like by nature's design.
What is reality?
You say, what is reality?
How do we learn to dance with the rhythm of life?
Yes.
How can I learn? How can I learn to listen?
Who is in charge?
Is anything really in charge?
Okay, let's bring it to a close then. That particular round. Take a breath. Allow yourself to move a little bit, need be. And I'd like to open the floor with this question. What are you learning about yourself that you didn't know before, if anything? Where is your discovery edge at this point? Go ahead, Melanie.
I feel pretty locked into my belief system. I kind of felt like I really, can't you get out of what you really believe? Do you have questions about stuff? And I thought, yeah, I'm kind of narrow-minded in my own little bubble of what I think I know.
Did anybody else have that same experience? Or if somebody says something you resonate with, just go ahead and stick your thumbs up so we see, kind of give weight to an idea. So look around, Melanie, you see other thumbs going up on that one.
Sure.
What else? What are you learning? Yeah.
My machinery of judgment is constantly on, and it showed up in people's question, how I listen to people's questions, and it's humbling. It's humbling to realize how much I still judge, even though I say I don't want to, or that's, you know, my spiritual path is that I don't judge. It's yeah, the machinery is still operating.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm really finding myself opening up to it, different ways of seeing things, because I've come to conclusion in the last few years that just a lot of things just don't work anymore. And that we have to think differently for the future, or we're just not going to make it. And so I'm constantly evaluating, reevaluating new ways of, new perspectives on how to look at things. Because we're stuck. And if we don't do something different, we're going to go over the cliff. And ultimately, you have to look at different formulations, different things. And that starts with what's inside. I mean, if you're locked down inside, you can't move anywhere. And so, you know, it's just, you know, I have a thing I call stuckness, which I've used in consulting. We talk to people about stuckness, which means people get stuck in doing something some way or another. And people notoriously that way. And if you do that, just, you go over the cliff. You can't do anything. You don't move. And part of moving is letting go.
So thank you, Michael. That's the reason I'm asking the question, what are you learning about yourself that you didn't already know? It's exactly that point. How do I discover what's brand new for me, or get myself out of my thought belief box? That's why we're asking it, is to allow that to open up. Anybody else? What are you learning?
I noticed that as the questions continued, I found myself leaning forward. I was engaged. I was open. Yeah, the question really moved me, and it was wonderful to engage in question and to see the gift of the question without even spending time on answers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I embrace unlearning, will I stay in chaos and confusion?
If I embrace unlearning, did you say?
Yes.
Socrates was put to death, I remind you.
That's right.
Asking powerful questions of folks can be very unnerving, can be unnerving for ourselves. That's why I'm asking, how might I pose a question that feels risky to myself? That may be signaling I'm on the edge of my own discovery. We want to keep a safe space, and we also want to go into the newness, right? So that's the point of all this.
Just trust the Tao.
Yeah. All those in favor of trusting the Tao, raise your hand, please. Okay, good. How much time do we have at this point, Sarah? Do we have 5, 10?
About 8.
Okay, well, let's say 5. Floor is open. Any other comments, reactions, or learnings? What you got?
I have
Mary Grace, go ahead. Particularly folks that haven't spoken yet, if we can.
Shall I?
Go ahead, Mary Grace.
Oh, okay. I'm reminded, I don't know if it's a new learning, but I'm reminded that I tell myself a story and it seems so real. Because the group's on Zoom and because we're more people here, I haven't felt as safe to share as in our smaller in-person group. And so those tender places in me, the deep places in me. And this morning has been really valuable to me as a reminder that this is such a safe, compassionate group and place. And this morning in particular, it reminds me of that to share more. I don't share much in the group. And so I'm challenging myself to share more of myself.
Thank you. Who else who has not had a chance to share yet, if anybody?
This is an amazing experience for me because I don't open up and I feel so attached to each and every one of you here today. And when Mary Grace first spoke about A and B and what's important to do, I was going to ask her, how can we support you in this? And then we move so quickly into such deep feelings and thoughts and sharing. I'm just so moved by this and so grateful to be part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, Thomas, one thing I'm doing or have done with some people I'm working with is the idea of living in the future, which goes back to Peter Schwartz back in 20 years ago, who did The Art of the Long View, and he talked about how you could actually trend forward. You could see the future by the way you looked at the present, and just looking at having one foot in the future and seeing where things are moving effectively by inference, by trending. And it's a practice, really, looking forward from where we are to see where things are moving next. And I think it's something where, because everything is moving so rapidly now, that we need to practice seeing where things are moving next. And just as a discipline, but just this whole question process is that what you're doing today is going to change tomorrow. And if you practice seeing where that is, you begin to discipline yourself to see how things are moving. And that becomes part of the way your worldview works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm. How do we move beyond the very basic problem going on in society everywhere of how we handle this pandemic? I mean, it's so basic and the division is so great. What do you do? How do you do it? I'm constantly challenged by this and the differences.
It makes me think, Judy, that an important question for us to ask and maybe leave with is, how do I feel about the questions I am asking? Are the questions I'm asking today ones that uplift me, give me hope, depress me, scare me? What is the effect of the questions on me and on others?
Mm-hmm.
I'm real interested in, how do we ask questions that other people will be empowered by, not terrorized by? What would be forwarding questions, both for me, for us, and for the people we encounter in these difficult and revolutionary times? So I'd like to just close with that idea. Go gently with your questions. I would encourage you to seek better and better, newer questions, ones that are empowering and gentle for yourself and others. And I thank you for sharing time with me. Appreciate it.